y nos vayan a empezar allí a reclamar o algo de que sea en inglés, ¿no? Ok, ya estoy aquí en YouTube.
¿Cuánto tiempo dura el video del deje?
¿Cómo?
¿Cuánto tiempo dura el video del deje?
¿Cuánto tiempo dura? Déjame ver.
Hola.
Dura 11 minutos con 29 segundos.
5, 6, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26.
Muy bien. Aquí solo tengo una duda, César. ¿Ya lo estoy transmitiendo?
Son 30 segundos que le lleva OBS desde que le doy transmitir hasta que finaliza. El buffer que tiene OBS son 30 segundos.
30, sí, te digo que sí me di cuenta que había un poquito. Ya estoy transmitiendo en YouTube. Hasta se pone el nombre solito, ¿eh? Está como más directo el asunto. Déjame ver nada más. Te voy a pasar, bueno, déjame ver.
Va.
Aquí. Déjate lo mando también. A ver si lo puedes ver en tu cel. No sé si se pueda ver. Hola.
Hola.
Que nos habló de la restauración forestal en su país desde...
Se supone que ya se está transmitiendo, pero...
La restauración forestal en
Doctor
su país.
Tambert,
¿Sí lo puedes ver?
me enviaste una liga, ¿verdad?
Sí. Hola.
Es el doctor Tamberly Conway.
Escucha en medio.
Hola, ¿cómo están?
Hola. Hola, doctora, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas. Perdón, es que tengo... A ver, miro para acá. ¿Cómo está, doctora?
Muy bien, muchas gracias. Es que yo puedo así retrocederme un poquito porque yo sé que están así tratando de arreglar todo, pero aquí estoy. Gusto verlo.
Muchas gracias. Estamos haciendo pues, la sesión de pruebas, tanto para la transmisión, para todo lo que lleva este proceso.
Hola, doctora. Buenas tardes. Mucho gusto, Elizabeth.
Soy César.
Hola.
Somos César y Elizabeth somos parte del equipo de la CONAFOR, entonces estamos aquí apoyando en la parte técnica.
Muchas gracias. Gracias por su apoyo. Muy lindo.
Gracias, doctora.
Elizabeth, ¿y quién?
Elizabeth Galvez y Julio César López. Somos parte del equipo de aquí de la Comisión Nacional Forestal y en unos momentos se va a conectar mi compañera Karina López. Ella también es parte del equipo. Entonces vamos a dar unos minutos, pero muchas gracias por estar acá. Estamos haciendo pruebas para ver que todo funcione bien con la traducción y que todo esté funcionando de la mejor manera.
Perfecto, voy a apagar mi micrófono entonces.
Claro que sí, gracias, doctora. Muy bien, pues yo estoy transmitiendo muy bien, César. Pero muchas gracias por estar. Ya lo voy a dejar así, ya se va a quedar guardándose. ¿Sale? César. Ya se está transmitiendo, ya sí se va a quedar. Tú también estás transmitiendo, ¿verdad?
Ya cancelé.
No alcanzo a ver. Mejor reenvíame la foto del chat porque no veo. Ya lo voy a dejar así, César. Ya no voy a quitar la transmisión, ¿sale? Para que se quede guardado allá.
Y se quede en mute.
En
Me voy a
idioma.
poner en mute también.
Sí, ya lo dejamos así. Voy a cerrar. Bueno, no sé si quieres transmitir.
Yo voy a empezar. No, ya no voy a mover. Yo voy a preparar la transmisión directamente de la conexión.
Ok, de acuerdo, ya estamos listos. Hola, Paula, muy buenas tardes. ¿Cómo estás?
Hola, ¿qué tal, Elizabeth? Muy bien, ¿cómo les va? ¿Saben qué? Está medio lenta mi compu, la voy a reactivar
Ok.
para que no vaya a haber trabas ahorita en el nuevo momento. Regreso en 5 minutos.
Déjame checar. Ah, el doctor Wang va a estar en video, ¿verdad? ¿Ya lo mandó? Ok. Yo lo pongo, César, no te preocupes.
Hello? Hello?
Oh, hello. Hello, Doctora Kathleen. My name
Yes.
is Cesar. I'm part for support technical. And we wait.
Hi, Doctora. Kathleen Wolf. Nice to meet you.
Hello.
My name is
Hello.
Elizabeth Galvez. Now we are making some proofs, technical proofs. But in just a few minutes, we will be ready. And Karina Lopez, she's gonna be connected in some minutes.
Okay.
Okay. And my partner is Cesar Lopez. He's part of the technical team. César, un favor, ¿le puedes mandar a Karina la liga?
¿Y a quién ese es quién? El perrito. Él anda con
Yeah.
nosotros.
My little pet. Well, not too little.
He didn't sound little.
No.
I have some big little pets too.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe there is a noise or something because he's just.
Uh,
All right, ¿cómo
I'm
estás,
good.
Katy? Doctora,
Hello.
¿qué tal?
Hey. I'm going to take a minute and go get a glass of water. I'll be right back.
Hola, Cari.
Ya,
Buenas
listo,
tardes.
pues. Hola, ¿cómo estás, Eli?
Bien, bien, Cari.
Entonces me decías que la
Sí,
duda
lo del video, aquí tengo ya ambos videos, ya lo descargué. Nada más te iba a preguntar, ¿en qué parte va?
es la penúltima, esa parte, una anterior de nuestro eje. Con
Ah, es
esos
que
dos,
Ok.
en principio eran en vivo, entonces las dos van a ser pregrabadas, tanto la del cierre por parte de Canadá como la de nuestro cierre.
Eli,
Pero
por
eso es después.
favor, ¿podrías darle acceso a María Ward? Y Warren Conway también es panel, ¿verdad, Karina?
Sí.
Por favor, Eli.
Hello, Katy.
Hello. Hi, Karina.
Nice to see you. Hola, Paula. Hi, Paula.
Hola, Karina, gusto vernos.
Gracias, igualmente.
Hola,
Hello,
Karina.
Kimberly.
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás?
Bien, gracias.
Qué bueno. Me alegro mucho verte.
Gracias igualmente también a ustedes. Today we held another webinar. We were not part of that, but Elizabeth and Cesar also supported with the technical aspects for the webinar. And they told us that they faced some technical issues because of, since they were using also interpretation, they were changing channels. In our case, it will be easier because everything will be developed in English. So the only thing they are asking us is not to change the channel. So not to use the option to listen to any other language. Like use the platform as it is without using any translation. Everything will be translated into Spanish and broadcasted in Facebook, and everything here at Zoom will be developed in English.
Does it help if we speak slowly, or does it not matter?
No, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
We have, I'm seeing the interpreter. We have professional interpreters, so
Wow.
that's okay.
Sí, ¿me escuchan?
Sí.
Ya estoy aquí adentro, pero no tengo la función de traducción, no tengo los dos canales aún.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Enseguida se te habilita la función. Nada más un
Perfecto.
comentario. Hay una grabación al final. Entonces, la última parte, el mensaje del director, está en español. Si nos cambias el switch a inglés,
Sí.
para que nuestros asistentes nos puedan, si deciden, puedan escucharlo traducido. Sí. Muchas gracias.
Okay.
Yes, that's true. At the end, it will be the only intervention in Spanish. It will be a message that we recorded from our Director General. So at the end, after the panel is over, and we listen to Dr. Wang Yu's message from UBC, then you can switch to English in order to be able to understand our Director General message, since he recorded in Spanish. At the end, in that case, that's fine. We will be covered, but at the beginning and during the panel, please not. I don't know if you have any question. Kalifi will be the one leading the conversation, introducing and moderating the panel.
Karina, I like your planning calendar over there behind you.
But I haven't changed months, you know, since we are working from home and sometimes from the office.
I know the feeling.
Yes, I haven't had time to update anything here at the office. But yes, during one weekend, I personally came to paint the wall, you know, like with this special paint, like a blackboard paint.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
I came and yes, I like my wall. Oh.
A friend of mine at the university bought this fabric that is whiteboard fabric. So she made an entire wall of her office into a whiteboard. So we go to meetings and we.
That's cool.
That looks like a dance move.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I have a question for the moderation of the panel. Are we gonna go one question at a time? Like Kalifi is gonna share the question and some of us will answer. Is that the format we will use, or is it gonna be more spontaneous?
Good question, Paula. When Tamberly and I suggested some changes to the questions, it seemed to me that some of us on the panel were more, would be the best person or persons to ask the question to, rather than all of us responding to all of them. So we'll see what Kalifi, how she wishes to manage this.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, to me it makes more sense that whoever has the best answer or has more experience in that specific question takes the lead.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I thought, but we'll see.
Maybe we could also recommend that one feels called to answer a certain question, if that would help Kalifi and Karina.
Yes.
And how, like, we would literally raise our hand or what, how we do it? Like in school?
I am finding though that with multi-person Zooms, raising one's hand is a good approach. So we'll see again what rather than talking over each other with the technology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The hand sounds better. So Kalifi is not here yet, right? No, she's not.
Oh, she just came
There
on.
she is.
There she is.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. How's everyone doing?
Great, thank you.
It's Friday.
It is Friday. Yes, thank goodness. We're getting a little bit more rain here in the Pacific Northwest, so that's been nice in terms of our air quality. But definitely.
I have a comment that I sent out the link that said the Zoom link for English with CONAFOR as the passcode or access code. And I placed that in an email. I also put it on Facebook. Well, apparently my husband was just trying to get in to log in early or something. It was supposed to be a separate link from our link. I didn't look at them, you know, compare them. I just copied it and pasted it from the email that Elizabeth sent. So I'm just warning that there may be people coming in. And I don't know if that would be, you know, just a matter of muting them as they're coming in, or is there a way to turn off their mics and video if that happens?
That's fine. I will advise our technical team, but since they are getting in through a different link, I think they do not have like some options, like yes, able to use them. So I will just confirm, but no worries. They will be very welcome to join.
Okay. I thought, oh no, I sent out the wrong link, but hopefully
No,
that
no.
I did not.
No, that's
Okay.
fine. That's completely fine.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question. Is it going to be the 2 hours straight, or are we going to have a break, or is it actually not 2 hours?
We are not considering, as maybe Califi will correct me, but we are not considering breaks for today, are we?
Not to my knowledge. I'm assuming that the session itself will be a little bit more fluid and probably won't just stick to 40 minutes and then a 40-minute audience question. It might end a little bit sooner. So I'm not anticipating that this will be a very lengthy process enough to perhaps require breaks. But would that be something you'd like us to consider?
No, you're right. I was thinking it was going to be 2 hours like the rest of the seminar, but it's actually 40 minutes. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Does anyone else have
I didn't get that part.
About the oh, does anybody else have any questions about the setup today?
We do, Califia. We were wondering also about the questions, if any individuals have been identified for any individual questions, or are they just going to be called one at a time and everyone responds to each question? Because it may be that some individuals are more suited for certain questions than the others.
So we do have an identified list of audience questions that are more suited to some experts than others. I think essentially my idea for the discussion is that it will be that exactly a discussion, and to perhaps kick off the panel series with a question and see where it goes. The list of questions themselves I will ask to whomever appears to be kind of more expert in that area, or who would like to answer it. So I kind of see this as a little bit more fluid and not necessarily kind of a staccatoed approach to panel discussion, if that works.
Sure. Thank you.
And do we just raise our hands if we feel the call to answer?
Yes.
Nice, easy. Thank you.
It's such an interesting conduit for a panel session. This online platform. I feel like everybody just has to get used to it, at least for the next few months. They're very, very, very interesting, very cool. Is there any other questions? Are there any other questions?
Not from me.
Okay.
Just gonna make my last part of tea and come back.
And I think that Robert will jump on. He said that he should jump on right before 3. He has another meeting up until that time.
Okay. Question for the others of you. You have a little less busy backgrounds. You think I should move, or am I okay here?
You're good. I see some nature behind you. Is that?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Look.
Wow.
Western red cedar. And,
wait, maybe you can
native
shift
huckleberry.
Shift your table or something. Right. Oh yeah, with the hummingbird. Oh.
What do you think?
I like.
Okay.
I was trying to get nature back here with some trees, but I'm getting more light than anything.
There we are. With maybe the hummingbirds darting in and out.
There you go. And I like the images behind you with, is it a rabbit and something? Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. A cat, a rabbit. Yeah, ferret, or maybe a weasel. It was a gift to my husband he worked at environmental education center for about 15 years. And when he left, they gave him that. It's quite nice.
Beautiful. See, you're bringing in the more than human world with us. I like that. I wanted to do this outside, but it's so windy here in Lubbock.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't work.
Yeah, Tamberly, you're not exactly in one of the most forested areas of the United States, are you? There in Lubbock.
I've been planting my own forests since we lost 13 trees in Louisiana. I came back here and purchased like 25. So we've been planting trees for the past 2 weeks. And I have a nice little elm tree grove that I sit under every single day. And so that's my forest connection, my little urban forest. Oh, well, we're actually kind of more rural.
Yeah.
Lovely
the
behind
parcel that the parcel that I live on, so this was heavily forested, Pacific Northwest, lowland conifer forest. It was harvested, if we understand, in the 1940s. So we have second growth, but we have some Western red cedar that are 4 feet diameter now, trunk size. They're wonderful.
Lovely. And I'm wondering, Kathy, I know that Robert and I had talked about that amazing, I have not been able to view it yet, but the webinar that you all created for the CME credit.
Yes.
And I was wondering, because I know there are going to be both medical professionals, and I know I saw quite a number of public health professionals on, and maybe, I don't know if he's planning on even mentioning it, but obviously, you know, when we talk about different mechanisms, you know, to reach people about this, is there a plan for the release of the CEU yet? Like estimated?
Let's see. So as you probably know, Courtney and I are taking the lead on that, and Courtney Schultz, and we're working more front end now on an outline and of content, and then we'll assemble slides and other speakers. We were hoping by early December. I would guess it may be into mid to late December before it's ready.
But that's still a, you know, wonderful tool to, maybe we can even mention that as some online support.
Yes.
For individuals.
And in that we're planning on not so much of the evidence delivery, but more about ideas of program, how to set up programs, what are some of the things that a manager or a program director would want to think about associated with outdoor health-oriented, including forest bathing programming. Because we're seeing a lot of interest in that, and we thought that that would be a much better service of the CEU than yet another recitation of the evidence. So that's the heads up, or the quick overview of what we're trying to achieve.
I know that you have met John Warner in the past. He's the district forester. But he, along with Dr. Dan Porter, have been bringing forest therapy to their state forest for quite some time. And I learned yesterday that the Texas Forest Service's media is interested in kind of shooting out a story about forest therapy. So I'm not sure, they may be reaching out to you. I saw him calling through today, but he will be retiring in January, and he leaves quite a legacy. So I would definitely pitch on as a potential candidate.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm here. It's Robert.
Hello, Robert.
How's everybody?
Excelente. Gracias.
Very good.
Bien, gracias.
Robert, you have a big light bulb right behind your face, and so we can hardly see you there.
He just shines brightly. That's just Robert.
Maybe that's his light. There you go.
We were just talking about your CME credit with Kathy and team.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and she was saying that the CEU credit is on the move too. So that was exciting.
Yeah, that's yeah. I think Kathy and Courtney are taking the lead on that one, so it's great.
Yeah. Good to see you, Robert.
Likewise. I'm just going to run down and grab my power cord just in case I get too low.
How have the other webinars gone? I've not been able to attend. I've actually had a full week remote conference running every day, so was not able to attend the earlier webinars. How did they go?
I believe that they were pretty well attended, and then there were a series of questions, follow-up questions from the audience that were directed towards the specific experts themselves, and then some that kind of fell into general categories. So I think it was well attended, and the recordings of those kind of live events are up on Conafor's Facebook website. So hopefully it'll have a little bit more opportunity for more viewings in the coming weeks. Well, at least on our side, we'll try to promote it a little bit more after the fact.
Kalifi, I'm having a hard time hearing you. I'm not sure if others are as well. Okay.
Yeah,
it just sounds like you're way off in the distance.
Okay. Is this better?
Not much.
And Kathy, it was really, I think, powerful. The first couple of days were much more focused, I think, on the science and, you know, what people are doing in different nations. And then yesterday, Anissa, Dr. Hernandez brought like a very experiential piece to the puzzle. And there were a lot of comments yesterday in the Facebook Live, how vibrant it was, you know, to have both the science and then the experiential. And then Dr. Shen's presentation yesterday was, again, very powerful. I have sent so many emails to the U.S. Forest Service, hoping that some would participate. And I emailed Vicki Christensen yesterday in the hopes, because I knew that OneSap would be on last night. I'm not sure if she joined. It didn't look like it, but that is one that all Forest Service agencies should see. You know, it's just such an inspiration to see how their country, their Forest Service advanced this work so beautifully, and, you know, really made it a priority in 2010. I feel like it is the wave of the future here in the U.S. and throughout Latin America, with the propelling.
We are about to start. We are going to go live. I will turn off my video. I will leave everything to you, Kalifi, just to remind everyone to not move the channel of interpretation. We remain as we are now. And thank you, everyone. So whenever you tell me, Kalifi, we are going to go live.
One second, can you hear me? Is this a little bit better? No? Yeah, it is better?
Yes,
okay.
That's great. Better.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, I'm all set.
Okay, so we will start.
Great. So, hello to everyone. My name is Kalifi Ferretti-Gallon. I work for the University of British Columbia's Faculty of Forestry as a research manager. And our projects at the Asia Forest Research Center in the Faculty of Forestry over the years have been increasingly seeking ways of understanding the intersection or interdependency between human health and the natural world, specifically, of course, forests. And I'd like to take this time to thank our colleagues at CONAFOR, including CONAFOR's Director General, Senor Leon Jorge Castaños Martinez, the head of International Affairs, Ms. Karen Sanchez, and her team, coordinated by Ms. Karina Lopez. So I hope everyone had a chance this week to view the pre-recorded sessions of the invited experts that we had the honor of hearing of, including Dr. Ching Li, who discussed the introduction and direct health impacts of forest bathing and forest therapy. Dr. Andreas Mikkelsen, who did a bit of a deep dive into the medical benefits of exposure to green areas and forests. Dr. Yuhara Iaoa, who discussed the practical application of forest therapy. Our director of the AFRC, Dr. Guangyu Wang, who presented UBC's research on forest therapy and the kind of cutting edge areas of research focus on forest therapy. Dr. Anita Hernandez, who discussed its application in Latin America. And finally, Dr. Wan Sop Shin, who discussed Korea's experience with the application of forest therapy through policy. So to cap a very rich week in forest therapy discussions, we've invited 4 more experts to discuss pressing and relevant questions regarding forest therapy in this live session. So I'd like to please welcome Ms. Tamberly Conway, who's the founder and CEO at Conservation Connections, Dr. Kathleen Wolf, a research social scientist with the University of Washington, Dr. Robert Zarr, founder of RX America Pediatrician, and Paula Pijuan, founder of Respira Bosque in Baja California. So I just wanted to take this time to discuss the kind of framework of the panel session. We will begin with a round of brief introductions by our experts, followed by an in-depth panel discussion, including questions that came up frequently by viewers during this week's discussions. And then we will leave time at the end for audience questions. So I would like to invite our experts to introduce themselves briefly to the audience, starting with Dr. Kathleen Wolf.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'm speaking with you from Seattle, Washington, where I work at the University of Washington. And over the last couple of decades, I've done research about people's response to nature and cities, particularly human health. And so I'm really looking forward to today's panel.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Tamberly Conway.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Tamberly Conway, and I served with the USDA Forest Service for 12 years. And during that time, for about 10 of those years, I focused greatly on the relationship between health and nature connections. And over time, I was able to work as the Conservation Education Program Manager and Partnerships Diversity Inclusion Specialist in the Washington, D.C. office, where I had the wonderful opportunity of finding forest therapy. I became a forest therapy guide in 2018, and through my work at the U.S. Forest Service, I was able to help propel this practice both internally and externally, especially to diverse audiences and primarily to Latino communities. And it's just an honor to be here today and in support of envisioning movement forward into Mexico and Latin America with this important practice.
Great, thank you, Tamberly. Can I invite Paula Pijuan?
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Paula Pijuan from Ensenada, Baja California, Mexico. And I became a certified guide in 2017. I'm from cohort 10. I never imagined that this practice would explode so much so quickly. And I live in the border between United States and Mexico, and so it was easy for me to get access to the training. And I've been wishing to see the practice grow in Mexico. Unfortunately, right now, I'm still the only certified guide until now because there's more coming. But I've always been seeing the potential that Mexico and Latin America has to develop the practice. And one of my main interests is like for us to have more proof of the value in terms of physical and mental health for people of forests and other natural ecosystems. My background is as an oceanographer with a master's in environmental management. So I've always had a big interest in preserving our natural spaces, which are always in high, I don't want to use the word attack, but they're always menaced in one way or the other. So having more and more science that proves how these ecosystems are like completely crucial to our health, it's something that I think it can only benefit both humans and the natural world. And I'm really proud and honored to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And can I invite Dr. Robert Czar?
Hello, everybody. Thank you again for the opportunity to join this conversation. Once again, I'm Dr. Robert Czar, and I come to you from Washington, D.C. And I am trained in pediatrics and in public health. And about 10 years ago, I became very interested in the role of nature as an intervention that could be used routinely in a clinical setting to help my patients improve their mental and physical health as well as their social well-being. So this is how my entry into this world, and huge thanks to the National Park Service and many other agencies, also now the USDA Forest Service for really helping me along the way and teaching me how nature can not only serve as an intervention to improving human health, but can foster a sense of stewardship for these places that we're actually in. And in 2017, I decided to take what was at the time a local network called DC Park RX and turn it into something a bit more national and even somewhat international now, called Park RX America, not to be confused with Park RX, which does great work as well. And just last year, I took one more dive into trees and forests, and also, like our fellow panelists, am now a certified nature and forest therapy guide and certified by the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. So I'm a big believer of nature on a personal and a professional level, and make it a daily routine to find my nearby nature to help me recover from the stress of every day. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you so much. We have with us a really wide variety of expertise. And from what I've learned over the last week is that really forest therapy comes down to the individual's connection to the nature surrounding them. So I thought I might start this panel discussion by asking each one of you, in your experience, what are some maybe even anecdotal examples of the effectiveness or benefits of forest therapy? Paula, can I begin with you?
Thank you. Well, as I think I mentioned in the video that was shown yesterday on the webinar, how I came about to this practice. And I worked before being a forest therapy guide, I worked in the environmental education. I've always had an interest in people appreciating and loving nature and therefore taking care of it. And I have always been doing it through environmental education, which is always just like mostly concepts and information, which is crucial for us to understand it. But the emotional part was lacking from my own perspective. And I have been thinking about a long time just how to show that to people. And when I found forest bathing, it's exactly what it is. It's people having a direct experiential, sensory, and many times emotional experience with nature. People open up, and for many, it's like the first time they see it. It's like becoming a child again. So I have these two perspectives. I've seen how people respond with the environmental education, which is beautiful. I mean, people learn so much. But with this one, people just like open their minds and their hearts, and the tendency to to fall in love not with just the big and majestic trees or the big and majestic waterfalls, but with the little tiny animals or with the rocks or the sand. It's just like really becoming innocent again and opening up to a sense of awe, of wonder, of everything around us. And I just see it in every single walk. And it's beautiful to see the transformation that people can live in a couple of hours.
Great, thank you for that. Robert, any experiences you'd like to share?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, being a practicing primary care pediatrician, my day is full of anecdotes. That's what I do every day. And, you know, really getting back to the essence of the conversation, which has to do with nature, but I think, you know, even perhaps more poignant is just trees. And one example that comes to mind is a patient of mine who came for a visit a couple of years ago and looked visibly distressed. And when I asked a little deeper about her, you know, why she looked that way and what she was experiencing at the time, she told me this story of how her father was traveling to Cuba, where he's from, to visit family and relatives down there. And while he was there, he was driving and he accidentally, you know, he hit a horse, and there was a man on the horse, and was actually put into jail and prison, and he's still in there. He hasn't come back yet. She was, you know, visibly distressed with this, suffering from anxiety, and you know, I was listening to this story and wondering what on earth I could offer her as an intervention. I clearly couldn't go to Cuba and get her father out of prison. But what I could perhaps do was, you know, get some insight from her as to, you know, maybe a way to manage this stress while he's there and while he's not with her back in DC. And I asked the usual questions that I think the primary care pediatrician would ask. And I offered also, you know, access to therapists, which we have as well. And she wasn't ready for that. So I quickly dove into my question that I like to ask a lot of my patients is, where do you feel safe and comfortable? Is there a place you can find some solitude and maybe some solace? And her response to me was not just a particular place, but a particular tree. And this is a tree that happens to be in the National Zoo, which is just a few blocks from the clinic and a few blocks from her house. And I asked her what she does in, you know, near or around this tree, and she offered that she will sit with her back on this tree. And that became for me an opportunity to drive home the importance of being in nature and being in this safe and comfortable place, which happens to be literally at a specific tree, for her to be able to recover at some level from the stress she's undergoing. So this actually became a prescription for her, and I turned it into a commitment from her to do this for herself several times a week for a certain amount of time. And this really ties nicely into the work that I do with nature prescriptions.
Great. It really is interesting to see how important day-to-day access and easy access is. And you don't necessarily need to find a big forest, but perhaps to find the local zoo to be able to reap these benefits. Tamberly, do you have any experience you'd like to add?
Absolutely. And I'll make a point that I was with the Forest Service for 12 years and I graduated. I left the Forest Service in December of 2019 to move forward into this new journey, really focusing deeply on forest therapy and helping to carry this forward to Latino communities. But while I was with the Forest Service, we partnered in an event that was focused on citizen science. And there I met a family. I met Raquel Pinto, who had 3 young boys, and she was obviously a little uncomfortable in nature, and we were using this citizen science tool called iNaturalist for this global challenge event. And suddenly I saw them kind of dropping in to this experience by being close and touching and noticing things around them. About 6 months later, she had the opportunity to train as an Association of Nature and Forest Therapy guide. And I knew her beforehand and the fears that she held and some of the mental, physical, and emotional stressors that she held in her life. And I've seen a personal transformation in her, and not just her, but her boys, her whole family. And it's when those powerful happenings occur and you're able to see a complete shift. I've had a shift in myself as a result of becoming an ANFD certified guide, a 6-month process of just dropping in and really noticing yourself, who you are, and the gifts that you can bring to the world. And I see this happening on guided walks, that people will come back to share what they're noticing. And they're often reflections of what they're seeing themselves in nature. And sometimes you see these transformative experiences. And also wrapping back to the citizen science piece, I've noticed that people begin to notice very, very fine details in the natural world, kind of like Paula was saying just now. And I really feel that this will be a practice that enables people, community members, again, citizen science, community science, to become extremely connected to the natural world around them and becoming true conservation leaders, developing that land ethic and really helping to propel the health of our forests. I always say forest therapy, they say it's for people, it's really for our forests. So I see just a lot of transformation and connection between humans and the natural world.
Excellent, thank you. Kathy, would you like to add?
Yeah. So as a scientist, I'm aware of the work of a community of scientists that have been working for decades, almost 40 years, on research about nature and health. And we've heard some of the creators, some of the investigators of that work this week. And so what I'm noticing, I'm going to speak very much, not just myself, but in this moment of COVID, we are experiencing, people all over the world now are experiencing a compressed and exaggerated and elevated level of anxiety, stress, uncertainty, grief, so many emotions and experiences in such a short amount of time. And what I'm seeing in my own life is the need to be outdoors on a routine basis, daily, for short amounts of time. I don't have to go far away. I can't go far away. We're not traveling any longer. So what is near me and dear to me has become important. And I'm getting contacts from journalists and writers from all over, beyond the United States, as well as in this continent, wanting to know about why it's important to be in nature. And my fellow panelists have spoken to that so eloquently. And I'll pick up on one idea that Paula mentioned, and that is awe. What I'm hearing from people and my own experience is we are taking the time, we're putting aside our phones, we're taking the time because we have to be close to home for the most part. And we're looking more closely at those nature elements around us, and we're experiencing awe in the everyday. We don't have to go away to the coast or to the mountains to experience awe, and trees are a source of that awe. And from a psychological perspective, which is where my science is grounded, awe helps alleviate anxiety. Awe helps alleviate stress. And so nearby nature, trees, we've heard the science, but the science is expressed in our everyday lives. And that's what I'm encountering and hearing about from many people at this time.
Great. And just to follow up on that, we are in a really unique time of access being limited to, perhaps depending on where we are in the pandemic within our respective cities, restricted to perhaps the four corners of our houses. And because as we're learning, forest therapy is really a deeply personal and individual act, I wonder, I'll open this to the floor, how can people increase the introduction of that practice on kind of a day-to-day basis, perhaps with limited access to green? Is it simply just finding a plant, or so I open that to the floor. Raise your hand if you'd like to speak to it. Paula.
One of the ways I like to end the forest bathing walks that we do is to remind people that the feeling of connection that they felt during the walk deep in the forest or amongst the trees is not unique to being there. It's a way of being. It's a state of relating to the world that we live in. And I always mention that we people have this idea of, we always think of nature outside and the cities over here. And that's so not true. I mean, first of all, everything is nature and everything is made up of nature. And there's so many reminders, I call them as well, like allies, both within our homes and around, even in the busiest cities. Like, I've had the experience of being in traffic and, like anxious and angry and stuff. And I was in a red light, and I suddenly looked up and I saw the leaves of a palm tree moving. And that was a reminder enough that I don't have to be in that state of rushing all the time. And for me, it's like, once you open up to nature as a teacher, as a reminder to come back to this moment and to let go. Nature is everywhere. You do not have to be in the depths of the forest to have that experience. I understand that it's a good door opening when you do it deep without all the noises and all the distractions. But everybody can do it just walking in front of their homes. I mean, there's animals, little insects, plants. Once you open up your eyes, it's everywhere. We can't run away from it, actually.
Great. Tamberly.
Bouncing off of both Paula's comments about nature is wherever you are, and we are nature. Being in an urban setting, there are so many of the ANFT certified guides around the world who live in urban areas. And bouncing off of Dr. Wolf's comments in terms of COVID, we are in our spaces of nearby nature. And when in March, early April, when things really started to turn in that direction of knowing we could not go deep into a forest, maybe because we couldn't travel there, etc., some of the guides around the world started to think about ways to bring this practice to people wherever they are. And there is now, there are many guides around the world who are bringing this practice remotely. In other words, we could be here on a Zoom call or even just on a telephone call, and the guide, the ANFT certified guide, can be guiding you as a participant into invitation, and that would be stepping outside to your nearby nature, and or even some have been participating in their homes. I've guided several of these forest therapy sessions, and the real reactions of people, and that just stepping outside of their homes and then coming back to share with the group. So you have this interconnectivity kind of in community, even though maybe you're in Panama, Mexico, around the US. We've done many of these in Spanish, being witnessed into what you're sharing. But also we've had so many people just say, I didn't realize that this is the treasure that I had right outside of my door, or that this plant in my home, I didn't realize that it was dusty and dirty and it was thirsty, and so I gave it water. I mean, you see this reciprocity emerge even in these types of, remote settings. And so people can still practice, and then they start to see how they can practice it on their own at home, just through sensory connection. And so I think this is a way that we can advance forest therapy, but helping people to understand how they can embrace this practice themselves.
Great, thanks. Yes, Robert, I know that your practice is specifically kind of prescribing people experiences as opposed to medications. I wonder, with your wealth of expertise, if you had suggestions on how people can increase their access.
Yeah, and I think thank you for bringing that up. You know, I think in this conversation, or in any conversation about nature, therapy, and forest therapy, I think it behooves us to remember the most vulnerable populations, and you know, we're not talking about a few hundred, but rather millions, and in some cases billions of individuals around the planet who are not doing so well. And the population I serve is largely Black and brown, and very immigrant, and really doesn't have the kind of resources that, let's say, I do. So keeping that in mind, and going back to Kathy's comments about the pandemic and the anxiety, in some sense that's driven by certainly the level of uncertainty. But I would say that what we're seeing right now is this acute stress of a pandemic. We've had previous pandemics, we'll have future ones, on top of this very steady and quite elevated cumulative chronic stress that really leads to these poor health outcomes. And I think that what we can do now is, in keeping in our minds the living conditions and the social conditions of the most vulnerable, is to go back to this issue of access. Where is that place? And that speaks to our conversation now, frankly, which is sometimes, you know, if you ask somebody where they feel safe and comfortable, has some sort of natural element, it may unfortunately be indoors, but it may be near a window. The window maybe can open. It might be a balcony, if you're so lucky to have a window that opens. It just so happens I work in a building and no windows actually open. There's barely any sunlight. We have a rooftop that's not really accessible. If you get up there, there isn't a single plant or tree. So keeping in mind that not everybody has that kind of access to what we wish they had access to, and working within their environment, within their fears, within their anxieties, to come up with an experience that includes nature, but is done in a way that is relevant and feels safe and comfortable for them.
Great. This really is an individual practice, but I wanted to take a step back here a little bit to think about the reason why we're having these conversations this week is because countries increasingly are looking to scale up this practice and perhaps promote it or apply it, not uniformly, but on at a larger scale. Kathy, with your experience in social science research, because this really kind of falls, I think, in the intersection of the personal, the social, the environmental, and the political, how do you think organizations or even countries can begin to really introduce this concept in a way that it gets integrated and rooted at the individual level?
So we're now, with that question, we're doing a bit of a pivot from our shared understandings and our shared experiences of some really transformational experiences now to how do we make this available for more people, or for all people, as Robert talked about. And I think what has to happen is there has to be a recognition of the importance, first of all, number one, the importance of this activity, that it's not recreation, it's not leisure, it is profoundly important to us. It is a profoundly important connection to who we are, to other people, to who we are with the natural world. And then, as Tamberly, as Dr. Conway pointed out, our relationship with the world and the environment more broadly in terms of stewardship. So I think there's some, I'll just throw out a few elements that I think about. And based on our prior conversation as a panel, we'll begin to embellish and expand on these ideas a little bit. The first then is the recognition of the importance of this activity and the importance of this activity for all people. And the other speakers during this week, hosted by CONAFOR, have been very good at making the case. They have brought the case from other nations, from other programs, from other national perspectives, to help us understand how to make that case in other nations or other communities or other governmental ministries. So then we need to think about, well, if we're committed to this, what do we need to make it happen? And I think that's where this conversation will evolve. We need the green infrastructure. We need to assure that there is nature in our cities. And urban planning to date has not really regarded parks, gardens, open spaces, trees as an essential planning element. Transportation, there are elaborate, sophisticated systems for transportation. Housing, there are elaborate systems to try to assure there's adequate housing for people. Utilities, water, sewer. If you go to a city planning department, there are dedicated professionals that are building on over a century of urban planning. Where do parks and nature fit in that? Oh, go talk to the people who do the green stuff. We need to bring this into the core of what cities are and what city systems are, and then build the professional base around that. And that's where the forest guides, forest therapy, forest bathing guides can play a key role. And I don't think they've had that opportunity yet. So I think that this is exciting. If this launches in Mexico and other nations, then the forest guide group professionals can become part of that formative policy building committees and coalitions. So first of all, we take this in as individuals, and then we look at the broader systems of how it can happen within our cities to assure that we have the nature where people can go and have these profound experiences.
Great. Yes, Tamberly.
Yes, I would reflect off of Dr. Wang's presentation calling for forest therapy to actually become a pillar of the forest industry. And I know that Dr. Shin mentioned that as well. If we can offer this as a service to communities as a job opportunity, as an employment opportunity. And I'll mention that last year I had the honor of attending a Partnerships in Community Forestry conference that was funded by the Forest Service primarily with the Arbor Day Foundation. And Amos Clifford, who's the founder of the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, and my former mentor, Pamela Worth, were there with a table, and there were urban foresters flooding that table. People were very interested in how do we bring this practice? How do we become trained as guides to bring this back to our communities and our urban settings? And I know so many stories. I've guided a number of walks, and I know others. I was actually one who went on my first forest therapy walk. And after that walk, I knew I had never experienced this before as a conservation educator. This was something completely different, and I wanted to do this as a practice. And I've had a number of people, even Anissa, Dr. Hernandez, who spoke yesterday. There were several people who, after their first walk with her and many other guides around the world, they say, I want to do this. I've been in the natural resource realm for many years and working with youth career pathways. Never have I seen something so powerful that after one experience, somebody says, I want to do this for a living. And so now many of those people who said that are now certified guides. So that leads me to believe that we're onto something in terms of offering this as a career pathway, an opportunity to bring this deep into communities wherever they are, urban or rural.
Great. Yes, Paula, I know that you have a really specific experience in terms of the application of forest therapy as an experience pathway. Can you add to this?
Well, yeah, before that, I wanted to mention that, and I don't think it has been mentioned in the webinars, because we are talking today here about forest therapy, and it's always related to forests and to trees particular. That's where most of the research has been done. However, there was one of the panelists was sharing that Japan has almost 70% of the country of Japan is covered by forests. In Mexico, almost 70% is arid or semi-arid. I myself live in an area with a Mediterranean climate, so we have beautiful, green, flowery, lush environments from November to April, and then everything goes brownish. And so the people here in my university, they have been researching this idea that if only what's green is healthy for us, and only what's green is natural and it's pristine. They have come to call our green spaces, they call them our brown areas. And we humans do not have a good relationship with brown. However, again, I've been sharing that I've done forest bathing or forest therapy walks or nature therapy walks in areas with desertic and volcanic areas with small shrubs. And I've also done them in areas that are full and lush with trees. And to be honest, I mean, I don't know how much research has been conducted in other ecosystems other than forests. But again, the sense of awe and wonder and connectedness and the opening of the eyes of, especially in a desert, because it's easy to be in awe in a lush jungle and in a beautiful redwood forest. It's harder in an area where the plants and everything is smaller, but it's all about opening the senses. And this is where I wanna, because the opportunities that can open to forest, rural communities and forestal communities in terms of ecotourism that they can offer, for me, it's really important that a lot of Mexico is not forested, and that this practice can also be conducted in areas that, what I see that has to be like, that's the prerequisite, is that it has to be natural. It has to have a certain scale of biodiversity. And but that's one thing that I wanted to comment. If we only focus on the green, and I know it's just a concept we use as green infrastructure, but that sometimes really affects our brown spaces that end up being bulldozed to put grass that doesn't even belong here. And we do not have the water and the resources to get the green. And if we let nature do its thing, it's just there for us. But we have to be able to open to more than just the green and the trees. From my perspective, the cactuses are beautiful as well.
Robert?
Yeah, I was thinking about the sort of this policy level question of where does this, what changes are we going to need in order to bring a practice like forest therapy to a national level and to spread throughout the world. And I think that one of the ways we might do this is by partnering more with the healthcare and public health worlds. This is not talked about very much, but granted, the healthcare world milieu in the U.S. is quite distinct from Mexico and Canada, South Korea, and Japan, for example. And I would say that, I can speak for the US in that we spend, 95% of our healthcare dollars on chronic disease management. Very little is spent on prevention. And a lot of this is driven by the economy of healthcare, frankly, in the US. But getting back to policy once again, what could be the role in this for doctors and healthcare professionals, maybe even hospitals, some hospitals and community health centers, in this partnership that could exist between, the forest therapy movement and the delivery of care. For example, ParkRx America now, I didn't know how much it was going to grow in the short time we've been around, but we now have 1,000 doctors and other healthcare professionals who've joined our platform in the US and in some countries around the world. And I sort of imagine, you know, these individuals as spokespeople and as connectors so their patients can have the knowledge and access to the kind of forest therapy we're talking about. So even if we can't change big systems and save literally trillions of dollars, no joke, here by keeping people healthier and happier and having that social well-being, you know, we might think on a smaller policy level of how can we connect to these at least individuals who already get it around the world in terms of the importance of nature as an intervention, but going further than that and providing these forest therapy experiences.
Yes, Kimberly.
I'd love to add to Robert's comments in that just today on one of our WhatsApp with the bilingual cohort that trained in Puerto Rico, there are 22 that are on the WhatsApp list. And I just saw them posting today the ParkRx America link and asking among them, hey, has anyone signed up? And Dr. Anissa Hernandez, who presented yesterday, is actually one of the providers on Dr. Czar's with the ParkRx America program. And, you know, I would just call forth having guides, having forest therapy guides become some of those providers who are writing park and forest prescriptions or nearby nature prescriptions. And I know that as Robert mentioned, I mean, it is in the power of partnerships. And I think Dr. Shin's presentation yesterday really called that forward in linking all of these. I mean, look at the people who are here today, researchers, medical professionals, practitioners, connectors. And so bringing that together in unity and encouraging through, I mean, I really think the public needs to know. And so some form of campaign in which we are all reaching our constituents, because each of those sectors, natural resource realms, medical professionals, researchers, they're all reaching different kind of sectors. And so doing that cohesively, I think would be a really wonderful way to carry this practice forward from the public policy perspective.
Great, thank you. We've been talking a lot about the different opportunities and perhaps the best pathways forward where we see access points to introducing forest therapy. I wonder if I could just open this to the floor. Do you see any specific challenges that you can anticipate either in the near or long future that you would caution organizations or governments to at least be aware of, if not avoid? Kimberly.
Well, you know, I would just use, again, personal experience. And again, I was very fortunate to work with the Forest Service and somehow miraculously, I feel, see the Forest Service during that time embrace this practice, embrace it strongly enough that they would support programming, for instance, with ParkRx America, programming at Latino community events and training. The Forest Service actually funded the training of several individuals prior to the training of these 22 new forest therapy guides in Puerto Rico, or actually around the world. There are 14 in Puerto Rico, 1 in Nicaragua, and 1 that's training in Mexico, Naomi. So she will be, I spoke with her today and she said I could mention that she'll be certified by December. So we're really excited about that. She's in Mexico City. And then people throughout the US. So, you know, really being able to advance in that manner, but making this an accessible practice, because many communities of color and communities throughout Latin America can't necessarily afford the training that all of us have actually attended unless there is some form of support. And I'm not saying that people should be able to go free of charge. I do believe that there should be an investment. ANFT has provided a number of full scholarships, and often those are the individuals who do not complete because there's no personal investment. And, you know, so being able to somehow invest in what you can based maybe upon your you know, your financial situation, whatever that might be. And then having funders, and those funders could be a variety of maybe employers being able to help to send that individual who invests personally like I did, and then the Forest Service paid for the other half of my training. So I had personal investment, but the Forest Service invested in me as well to do this. So it's kind of that model, and being able to provide this opportunity to others throughout the world.
Kathy.
Yeah, in terms of challenges and issues, I'd like to introduce the idea of standards. And there's a balance here. So if standards could be introduced, that would maintain the quality of the training of guides. It would maintain the quality of the experience for people who participate in a forest therapy event. And I might mention too that maybe we think about these standards not only about the single experience, but about a routine of experiences. As an example, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States have guidelines for routine physical activity. So many minutes per week for adults, so many minutes per week for children, and so on. So maybe the standard is not only who provides the guide service and that standard of quality of experience, but also to make it a habit, to make it part of your life that continues to renew you, that continues to provide benefit. The flip side of standards is that it doesn't become too rigid, that it doesn't become bureaucratic, because nature, ecology, green infrastructure is so different. As Paula was talking about, green landscapes, blue landscapes, people who live near major water. And I'm just losing my mic there. People who live near water, green landscapes, literally forests. So we want to have enough flexibility within these systems. And that's what we're talking about, is taking what is now kind of a random opportunity for most people to experience a professionally guided forest therapy session, but to make it something that is more readily accessible, but not become so restrictive in its character and implementation that we can't acknowledge the different types of ecologies and ecosystems that are around us, that we should know about it, bioregionalism, as well as ease and equity of access, as Robert talked about earlier. So standards, I think, are certainly necessary, but there needs to be carefulness in how they're implemented so that they don't become too confining in how we move forward with all of this.
Paula, did you want to add anything?
Well, I'm guessing in the context, specific context of Mexico, and I know it's our country is very large and very diverse, but where I live, the nearest proper forest and national park is 3 to 4 hours away from us. All of the walks that I conduct have to be on private land because there's actually no public parks that are larger than a block in size. I mean, many areas in Mexico do not have any green or brown or any natural infrastructure. Depends on when you're at. So, but I don't think that has to be a limitation in terms of people accessing to nature therapy in natural spaces. So again, I live in a coastal area, so it's easy to conduct nature therapy along the shores, along the beach. And I think if we want this practice to grow, we do have to understand the limitations that Latin America has in terms of public parks and public spaces and their maintenance and ease of access. And at the same time, as Kathy was saying, like to have standards, but also to be able to offer alternatives where people can find nature, maybe not in a specific park experience. I'm not really sure where I'm going to, but I just it's so clear that we do not have what Europe has and North America has in terms of parks and public green spaces. But that doesn't have to be a limitation in terms of accessing nature. Maybe it will not be like it is in Asia and Korea, where it's so pristine and so well kept. But that doesn't stop us from being able to meet and encounter nature from a sensory and a mindful perspective. It doesn't have to be as perfect and specific and utopic, I would say, because our context is very different and it has to be adapted to where we are at right now.
Great. Yes, Robert.
Yeah, just briefly, and I really enjoyed everybody's comments so far on this. You know, I think that that this also comes back to the issue in terms of barriers of speaking again about, you know, the population who needs nature therapy the most is the least likely to actually experience this. Putting that aside for a second, I think there are other couple of big elephants in the room. I mean, one is in terms of barriers. One is the addiction to technology. You know, Rich Louv has said, I've heard him say this, and I love it, and I paraphrase him all the time, is that the more technology we have in our lives, the more nature we need to have to balance that out. So I think technology and the sort of addiction to technology is going to be a very, very big barrier. You know, I think the second, which we haven't really mentioned in this part of our conversation in terms of a barrier, is climate change, and all this anxiety and fear and uncertainty and unpredictability around us is inevitably something that is in our way. And the irony is, I think, that, you know, that one of the solutions, I believe, to finding a way to live in this new climate world is for us to be outdoors so we can appreciate the outdoors, so that we care about the outdoors and want to actually do something about preserving the outdoors. So there's this strange paradox that I actually see in some ways, perhaps as a barrier, perhaps as a way for us to understand how to overcome that barrier.
Great. I'd like to take the opportunity to perhaps, because we actually have quite a live and active audience asking a few number of questions, and I wanted to integrate that into the fluidity of our conversation here. So I think I'll just begin the audience question part. So our audience, please feel free to submit your questions through the chat section. Just jumping off on the kind of differences, temporal and geographic differences that perhaps the application of forest therapy needs to be adapted to. We have a question from Jesse Romero in Peru, who says that Peru is quite diverse and multicultural, and how can a uniform application of forest therapy integrate into this diversity of communities, and how does the knowledge become introduced and expand throughout these communities who might be a little bit diverse? Tamberly.
I believe one of the beautiful things about this practice is that it is culturally malleable. The individual who trains, dependent upon the culture from which they arise, can actually bring this practice to their own culture in many ways. I know a number of individuals from indigenous communities, for instance, who trained. One actually worked with the Forest Service, and shortly thereafter she left because she said she wanted to bring this practice to her own people. And again, it is a way in which people have that deep connection with the natural world, and often through their own culture. And Paola and I were actually speaking about this today in the training modules. You know, how do we kind of shift? And we were looking at that in Puerto Rico during this first bilingual training. We really wanted to shift that training model to be much more culturally relevant. And that is bringing in people from different cultures to help develop trainings that are then more culturally relevant. And so we're already having those conversations and actions. We learned a great deal from that first training, and much of that is being implemented into the first ever bilingual training that ANFT will be holding soon in December. And so that is a fabulous question and very, very relevant. Thank you for bringing that forward.
Kathy, yes.
I find that this question parallels similar questions about urban greening, the programs of bringing trees and parks and gardens in cities. And not so long ago, those efforts tended to be, hey, we're coming in, we're doing a park, meaning some city officials or a ministry, an agency. Now we're seeing North America, but I think also around the world, a much greater level of engagement with community for the sake of achieving certain ecosystem services and benefits in communities. And what that engagement does is it puts a unique and local character to the urban greening, to the urban forest planting, to the new parks creation. And that can be expressed as art. It can be expressed as the foods that are grown in a community garden. It can be expressed in many ways, the celebrations and ceremonies that take place in that new space. I think the same could be said for forest therapy training and implementation in communities. This is a new idea that's coming, it's growing so quickly, but it's growing in parallel with emerging recognition of the importance of citizen engagement and community engagement for urban greening and green infrastructure. So that level of engagement brings the benefits that are important, it brings the trainings that are important, it brings the relevance that is important. And so I never really thought about this, but a parallel track of the physical world change, the greening that happens, but also the forest therapy or other program activities that might happen as companion to that space.
Great. Yes, Robert.
I was very excited to see there's a question from Peru. I had the luxury of being able to travel in 2019 around the world. And one of the countries that we spent time in, about 4 weeks, in fact, was in Peru. And we were in and around Cusco area. And, you know, during this time, I was actually in my practicum. So I was finishing my practicum to become a certified nature and forest therapy guide. And you know, I was struggling a little bit with trying to do this in an international setting. And my mentor really sort of gave me a kick in the butt and said, look, you know, there's no better place, you know, in the world to do your practicum than what you've described, the environment where you are. And I'm telling all of this to you because to try to answer his question about sort of the, you know, the cultural relevance or cultural competency when you're talking about, you know, expanding forest therapy around the world. There's a certain universality to this practice that I think does naturally lend itself to every culture. And, you know, we had a Quechua guide showing us in and around the Cusco area. And you know, I felt so connected to him. I said to him, I'm also a guide. I'm a nature and therapy guide. And we felt an immediate bond. And many of the places we went to, you know, there was this element of, you know, degradation of the environment, of disappearance of the glaciers in this area of the world. And it's very sad, but it's very pertinent. And I think that, you know, not just as a potential for industry and revenue in these areas, but also as a way to raise more awareness and connectedness, frankly, with the nature around us. So I think there's a certain universality that perhaps can be the glue to hold together all of these the wealth of cultures and languages and places around the world through forest therapy.
Great, thank you. And just speaking of universality, we actually have had many questions throughout the week related to certification. And a lot of our audience members were wondering if certification was recommended, required. If so, what would be the best approach?
I would leave that to Tamberly.
Tamberly, yes.
So as a certified guide, I know the value of really immersing in this practice. And as we were speaking earlier, if this is going to be a wave of the future, a career pathway, whenever we enter into a career, we go through training, we go through certifications, we really immerse ourselves in whatever career pathway that is. And I just, from personal experience and from seeing the experiences of others, know how powerful that practice of training truly is. It's not about reading a few books and thinking that you kind of know what this practice is. There, in the training in which the three of us have engaged, and Dr. Anissa Hernandez from yesterday, is very integrated, very experiential. There are so many levels, and it's not an easy training, but it shouldn't be. And, you come out of it with such a spirit of connection and such an idea of how, you are now more connected to the natural world. It's transformational personally, but also I think it helps to transform you in that nature connection. So I highly recommend a training opportunity. I know there are others around the world who do so. I know that ANFT is one of the leaders in that movement and who brought this practice to the US and the world in 2012 by having this vision of, Amos's vision was to train guides to bring this practice to others. And I think, being able to train others to be trainers. And that's one thing we're looking at now, is how to train more Latino y Latinas to be able to carry this practice forward in a powerful way among Latino communities throughout Latin America.
Yes, Paula.
Regarding the question of whether one needs to be trained or certified in order to offer forest bathing walks, from my perspective, it's most of us previous to that had a relationship to nature. It's always in the doing mode. So we go to nature and we hike and we run and we cycle, because that's what we do in the cities. That's what we've been trained since we're little. We're doing. And so that's the way we relate, most of us, to nature. And what I've seen in some people sharing, groups without training that share forest therapy, what they're offering is like a 4-hour hike with a 20-minute yoga and then time for pictures under the trees. And that is really, that's therapeutical in one way, but that's not necessarily forest therapy. Forest therapy really is about the opposite. It's about going to nature and not doing. It's going into nature and being and feeling and sensing. And the majority of us in cities are so away from that state of being that it's really hard to guide someone into that experience if you yourself don't know it. And that requires training, as Tamberly was saying. So I shared the other day in the group, one of my fears of this promotion of forest therapy in the country, in Mexico and in Latin America, is that if there's not a training opportunity offered that it's viable for people that do want to train, it can very easily convert to I'm going to make up my own forest therapy. And for me, it's going to be 5 hours of hiking, and that's forest therapy. And it really isn't. Those of us that have guided, and we can see the difference in people, I myself see if I, as a guide, am not settled and I am not tranquil and mindful and really in a space of inner peace, what I have to offer the group usually is not, I mean, nature does most of the part, but we as a guide can make that connection complicated if we are not in a good space. So even though nature connection is intrinsic, just like Robert was saying, like it's natural to all of us humans, those of us in the cities are kind of disconnected to that. Once we connect to it, again, it's in our DNA. But there does have to be a process of regaining that inner intelligence and that inner knowledge, and then offering to others. And if I'm just aware of the fact that it can be very easily like use the term without any standard, and then how do we know what's actually forest therapy and what's just recreation or having a good time and taking pictures in a beautiful setting? That is not forest therapy.
Robert, yes.
Yeah, I want to say, you know, we're all a bit biased on this panel probably in terms of the importance of certification, but I think the answer is quite simply, unequivocally, yes. And maybe the other question for us to ask is not so much whether you should be certified, but how to pay for it, the funding of that. It's an investment in time, and it's an investment in money. And, you know, I could say the same thing about medicine. Do you have to go to medical school to practice medicine? Unequivocally, yes, you do. There's standards for that. And I would say too, as a bit of an analogy here, you know, in residency for pediatrics, you know, I spent many months in the intensive care unit. I'm not an intensivist. I'm a primary care doctor. I don't work in the ICU. But it gave me a perspective. So when I see my patients in the outpatient setting, in a primary care setting, I know what's going to happen if I don't do my job right. I know what the failures are. And I think the same can be said for this level of training and certification. It's intense. And it's a 6-month process just to get you to the point where, okay, now perhaps you're ready to guide. It's a very serious responsibility. And I think there should be standards, going back to the previous question, and those standards do come with certification. And it really lends a sense of sort of authenticity and legitimacy to the practice. It is very important.
Great. And then just picking up about the health sector, we had a question this week about how one, as an individual or group, could reach out to the health sector to begin implementing forest bathing as perhaps an alternative, or forest therapy as an alternative approach to human health. Robert or Kathy, I wonder if either of you can speak to that.
Sorry, the connection was lost a little bit. Could you repeat the question, please?
Oh, yes. We had a question regarding the health sector. One of our audience members this week, a few of them asked, how can we reach out to the health sector to implement forest therapy?
Well, if I may, Kathy, to start this off, I think that before I try to answer that question, I want to share with you some of the very depressing statistics about physician health, which I know a little bit about. And oftentimes we physicians think that we're immune to the kinds of problems our patients have. The truth is that we work very long hours. We dedicate our lives to our practice. We're often employees of large corporations whose bottom line depends on our productivity. We're feeling a sense of burnout and fatigue. We have more depression in our profession than in the general population. We have one doctor commit suicide approximately every day in the US. And that means every day there's a doctor who commits suicide, 1,000 patients lose their doctor. So I would say, to try to answer this question, one of the best ways to reach out to the healthcare community, the health sector, is by providing, and I'm not saying for free, I think these hospitals and corporations should be paying for forest therapy for their staff, for the doctors, for the clerks, for the clerical staff, for the medical assistants. Can you imagine, providing these experiences? Not, and this is something that we actually did with the USDA Forest Service, is that we connected here my clinic staff, my health center staff, with guides and training so that we could take our staff, rather than having a meeting indoors, we actually took them out on a forest walk, a forest nature therapy walk for 2 hours. So I would say that's one of the best ways, is to give our staff, to give those who are on the front line providing care and an experience, a real lifetime experience, what this is all about.
Thanks. Yes, Kathy.
I'm going to pull apart your question just a little bit, because Robert is speaking about and from within the healthcare realm or industry. There's really two dimensions of this. One is the healthcare industry, but then the other is public health. And these are the people who work for counties, they work for states, they work for national governments. They're epidemiologists. They look at broad scale patterns in what is happening with health, including, of course, treatment and therapy in the clinical sense. But within public health, there's discussion, there's a reveal, there's an understanding of late about what are called social determinants of health. And there's the recognition that your individual life choices, whether you eat organic food or the quality of your drinking water or your genetics, those things can be minor to your health outcomes compared to the quality of your living environment, the quality of your housing, your employment opportunity, and the quantity of green space in your community. So I don't think we have effectively framed nature for health more broadly and forest therapy or nature therapy more specifically as a social determinant of health with the public health professional community. And I think it's really an opportunity, because if this enters the policy, and you'll notice in my comments, I'm speaking at sort of the grandest scale, and that is policy of a city, policy of a state or a nation. And so public health is really, I think, an entry point in this. The individual experience, the intensity of the relationship between the guide and the nature element and the individuals. But again, to think about the policy infrastructure that enables that to happen, the public health community, the epidemiology community, I think is another opportunity to share these messages. And to Robert's point, share these experiences, invite them to have a nature therapy encounter so that they understand personally the benefit and can potentially, because the evidence is there, we have the evidence, but with that personal encounter, it becomes more compelling and motivating to take this to something that can affect thousands, if not millions of people.
Yes, Robert.
Just a quick corollary to what Kathy just said, thumbs up to all of that. I believe the World Health Organization in one of its sustainable development goals, I think it's number 11, actually speaks to some of this as well from the social determinants of health and access to public space. So I think that is an area, I just wanted to point that out. I think it's SDG number 11 for the WHO SDGs.
Kimberly.
And just to bounce off of some of Robert's comments in terms of his interest and other medical professionals' interest in reducing burnout, I know we were working together for quite some time to incorporate a green space on his rooftop, and that still is a vision we hold. But being able to work with hospitals and just as Dr. Michelson spoke, also Dr. Wonsup Shin and Dr. Wang, really integrating the medical realm, also the public health realm in implementation of green spaces in and around these health-related settings. We've been working with some medical professionals to implement these green spaces in their environments for their medical professionals, but also their clientele, their patients. And one of the things that has been brought up during these conversations have been forest therapy trails. forest therapy centers throughout the world, in Japan, South Korea. We heard from Dr. Wang there in British Columbia. And so I would call out for this type of infrastructure to be developed in collaboration. And I failed to mention upon my introduction, I am very honored. I just recently became the director of the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy Trail, Certified Forest Therapy Trail Program. And so our goal is to implement these trails and using forest therapy as a mechanism to develop that trail. Dr. Anissa Hernandez is going to be guiding with some of the other guides in Puerto Rico, individuals on that trail, veterans specifically, as a focus of this trail, and looking at restoration of the trail and restoration of people, but also guiding to gain insight from forest therapy walks on this piece of land on a national forest. And then from that, developing the trail based upon input from the community, from their walks. And so being able to integrate community into these using the practice. Some of these are actually going to be self-guided trails so that people can go out and receive invitations that are developed by a forest therapy guide along these trails so that people can go out on their own when they're not able to be guided by a forest therapy guide.
Great. And I think that this kind of lends to another question about resources. And I wonder if we could go around the panel and ask what are some good resources that you know of for organizations or even at the national level governments that they can access if they're seeking to dive deeper into forest therapy. Yes, Kathy.
And again, I'm tending to speak at a larger scale, policy, from community to city to nation. And what I'm starting to see is that certifications can be really valuable. So if a local government pursues a certification that is a recognition of their effort on behalf of some sort of goal. It might be sustainability or resilience or any number of important goals in these times. I'll mention the Biophilic City Network. And this is based out of University of Virginia. Urban planning professor Tim Beatley is the director, but there's an association of cities from all over the world that are pursuing the strategies and goals and certification of being biophilic cities. Well, what does that have to do with forest therapy? Biophilia, I suspect most who are with us are familiar with the word. It's this innate affiliation that humans have for nature, probably evolutionary in origin. But how it's manifested in cities then is that there is this level of nature that's of quality, that it's accessible by people, that it has biodiversity, that it provides ecosystem functions such as water quality and air quality. And layered through all of that, intertwined through all of that, are these opportunities for nature contact that support nature therapy, be it green space, blue space, brown spaces. And so we might think about and look at, so Robert mentioned the UN and some sustainability platforms. We might look at these certifications, be it at your nation's level, or be it at your city's level, or maybe even your local community, and see what sort of recognitions they're pursuing in terms of certification or policy, and interface forest therapy with that, because it lends itself to so many interpretations and so many different sort of policy goals. So I offer that is really think big, from a very intimate, beneficial, wonderful experience, but think big about how to elevate that to a broader platform of recognition within your nation, state, city, community.
Great. Anybody else have any inputs on best resources? Yes, Robert.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Kathy and I and two other colleagues, we just finished a continuing education activity, and that was sponsored both by ParkRx America and the USDA Forest Service. I only point that out because it's just hot off the press, and anybody can take it for free by visiting our website, parkrxamerica.org. I also wanted to mention that the Salzburg Global Seminar, which I was a participant a few years ago, had a session on, it was called Child in the City, and a major focus of that was on nature. And some very interesting things came out of that conference, which are available at their organization website.
Yes, Tamberly.
I just shared in the chat for attendees. Of course, you know, several of us are trained in the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy as guides there. And so I've shared both the English language and the recently developed Spanish language materials. Manuela Siegfried, who is one of the trainers at the first bilingual training, will be a trainer as well for the upcoming Spanish language trainings. And she and some other individuals really were instrumental in propelling the Spanish language site. But under that site, there's a tab called The Science. And I don't think all of that is yet translated, but there are some magnificent articles, some of them peer-reviewed journal articles, other just mainstream articles about forest therapy. And so that is an excellent resource. Also, you can find information about the ANFT Certified Forest Therapy Trail Program. And off of Robert's mention about the CME credit for medical professionals, that will also be launched as a CEU credit for natural resource professionals. So that should be launched sometime in December. So I know Kathy was talking about that earlier, and that's an excellent resource. I mean, now especially, you know, online resources are critical. And I'll also mention that, of course, the ANFT trainings have moved from being in person and then, you know, mostly Zoom related, where you would meet with pods and whatnot for that 6-month period, but very experiential. Now these are all online, and they've already started some of these trainings. And from what I've gathered from some of those who are training others, it's been extremely connective, so that these individuals in these cohorts are extremely connected with one another, and having those experiential learning opportunities, coming back to share, that they've been really, really vibrant sessions. So I would just share those as resources. And I would follow Dr. Wonsop Shin. And I know that there is a calling for, during the conference last year, Forest Bathing International Conference, where I first met Dr. Shin and where he spoke, there is a calling for an international process of developing international standards and definitions. And so I would just offer that during this conversation as a vision of how to come together around that piece, for sure.
Great. Thank you. And Paula.
Well, because we're in the context of most of our public is from Latin America, from Mexico and other places in Latin America, I want to go even farther back, because there's been a big movement of nature connection practices in the Anglo-Saxon countries for many years and decades even. And that hasn't really been like literally translated into Spanish. So I want to offer resources that are super basic, because that's where we have to begin. One of the books that I have is, look, what does it say? Disfruta de un baño de bosque, cómo despertar tus sentidos, tu mente y tus sentidos. And it's just a very basic and simple and beautiful book, but it can be very eye-opening to many of us, because a lot of us are not, have never had access to this other way of relating to nature. it's interesting because what I feel in Latin America is that a lot of the rural communities, a lot of our grandparents and our grandmother and grandfathers, they haven't lost it, or they never lost it. It's like more civilized countries lost it a longer time away. Many of us, we have, but our grandparents didn't, or our great-grandparents didn't, and the people in the rural communities haven't. So I'm really interested that the Latin American countries open up to the idea that there's this whole movement called nature connection, that they look for books and authors that, some of them are translated. There's quite a few books about forest therapy and baño and forest bathing in Spanish. But for me, that's kind of like a trampoline to see that we as Latinos, we haven't had such a big disconnect from the natural world. Like this validates the way maybe our parents or grandparents or great-grandparents were, but we're not that lost, I would say. But if we don't know it, then we are on this highway of more modernization, more technology, more technocracy, because we third world countries or developing countries are following developed countries, which the developed countries are wanting to go back to the roots of the developing countries, because that's where we have the break between humans and nature. And we have a huge opportunity as Latin American countries of recognizing how that gap is not so big, and how we can find inspiration and teachers amongst many of our neighbors and people that surround us that maybe we never paid attention to, because we're always seeking from validation from the experts, whereas nature connection experts are the people that live closest to the land. They don't need degrees, they don't need research. They have a very, very deep way of hearing and listening and really relating to the natural world. And for me, those are the elders, literally the elders. And we have the fortune of having many of them still around us in Latin America. So I feel something as simple as this is the baby step, open up to what nature connection is, and realize how many teachers we have around us and how much we can learn and actually respect them again. Because in modern cities, I can see it in Mexico, the people that work in the land, there's a big discrimination here still. We do not respect people that work in the land. Like I forgot the name, but for me, this is a movement that, again, not only helps nature, but it really helps bridge the gap between the city dwellers and the rural settlers. And this thing that you can see very big in Latin America, for me, they are the true elders and leaders of this. But we just strip them apart from that recognition in this seeking of modernization.
Great. Kathy, I saw that did you want to add something?
Yeah, just a really quick thought based on Paula's comments. And that is, a lot of the nature therapy literature, so my experience, the science literature to date, and the practice to some extent, is very much about that individual's encounter. So I am not a guide. I am not a trained guide. I've participated in a forest therapy session twice, 2 different sessions. And I was encouraged to really embed myself in a sensory encounter pretty much on a solo basis. There were times to recongregate, to become a group again, but it was very much about my intimate one-on-one with nature. All right, so the literature, the broader science literature about nature and health, talks about social cohesion, the importance of our interconnections with other people, and that has health consequences. And Paula is talking about cultures where maybe that individual encounter is not as valued, perhaps as beneficial as some sort of modification of this that becomes more group oriented. I offer that as a suggestion because we had a question earlier from someone from Peru who commented on the diversity of people and community in her nation. I think it was her nation. And so maybe it's not only the difference of language or nature reference points, but it's thinking about the social structure of a group or a population that experiences nature therapy and how that might reflect local culture, perhaps in ways that Paula pointed out. Maybe it's not as much about looking for natural nature, if you will, but maybe agricultural nature in some way, reflecting those embedded relationships to place in your own community. So an observation, and I'll see how my colleagues here who are actually guides, how they might respond to that.
Robert.
Yeah, just briefly, I think Kathy took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to piggyback off a little bit of what Paula said, which I loved. And maybe just add to that a little bit that, you know, I've always had a bit of difficulty in using the terms, you know, first, second, and third world, even developing and developed. You know, I think that every place has a lot to offer, and it sort of sets up this strange, you know, hierarchy, which in many ways doesn't make a lot of sense from a number of different perspectives, socio and political, to name one. But one of the things that I was going to say was, in terms of a resource, is we haven't mentioned, you know, the individual, you know, and I think the book that Paula, you held up, I think that's by Melanie Chukas Bradley, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So I know Melanie, she's a guide here in our area, and she's absolutely wonderful. I've been on walks with her as well. And it is a wonderful book, but I think part of what that book does is give you some insight into your best resource, which is really yourself. and perhaps that might be my take-home message in terms of a resource is, you know, we do something in forest bathing called, you know, a sit spot, simply to sit, you know, preferably about 20 minutes, but it could be fewer, and have no expectations. And really open yourself up. One thing to talk about is this SOS, simple, open, sensory experience. And do that, actually do that. That might be one of the best ways to sort of get a taste of what this is really all about. And so I think that's something just to mention to the audience, is that, you know, don't forget yourself as probably your best resource to understand what this is about.
Tamberly.
I'd just like to mention as well that as a result of the experiences of individuals through the colorful changes or cambios coloridos training that happened in Puerto Rico, that first bilingual training, there have been a number of these guides and guides that are still in training who have the desire to come together. And we've been working on kind of coalescing information as they are now inspirational leaders in their own communities, some of them in Latin America, others in communities in the US, who are inspiring Latino communities wherever they are. And so I would propose that, that we utilize their stories, them as resources, as inspirational leaders in this movement. And right now we're gathering, you know, their stories, their bios, their images, and Adelaida Rivas Sotelo, who is in Nicaragua and still in training, she is a conservation journalist and came through to this practice and is just so passionate about it. She's written an amazing blog. These are the types of stories I feel that really will call to other people throughout Latin America and to be inspired by their work. So again, just kind of envisioning that and what that will look like into the future and kind of planting that seed of vision during this conversation.
Great, thank you. I'm aware of the time. We might be wrapping up on our audience questions, but I invite any who have any last burning questions to submit them to the chat. In the meantime, I have a practical question from an audience member about any existing monitoring mechanisms or practices to evaluate the benefits of forest therapy. I imagine there talking about that at an individual or medical level, but I wonder if there's also if there are also monitoring mechanisms or guidelines to measure the benefits of forest therapy, maybe at even the social level. Yes, Tamberly.
I'm sensing that Kathy may be able to expound on this, but as we are entering into establishing the forest therapy trail on a national forest in Puerto Rico, Yunque, I was able to reach out to Dr. Namjoon Kil at the University of Wisconsin. He is also an ANFT certified guide. He has implemented some of his research and actually has established a forest therapy program at the university, or a course rather. And he's worked with veteran populations and at-risk populations using the PALM scale. So it's a way to assess mood, also looking at place attachment, nature connection. So again, kind of getting away from the biological aspects that really have been discussed throughout this entire week related to, you know, the real health related benefits. But I feel like there needs to be, and I know that Dr. Shin called for this last night, in that, you know, developing different methodologies to be able to capture this information. And I would say that there needs to be some level of research development or tools that we can assess changes in individuals, how this practice can actually help to propel people in their inspiring a purpose-driven life, inspiring the gifts that they bring, something that makes them happy, that they can bring to the world, that helps the world and the more than human world, and, you know, our natural world. And so I would just call for the researchers who are out there among us to really look at that type of maybe more qualitative analysis, but integrating some quantitative aspects, which we know can really help to drive public policy as well.
Yes, Kathy.
So the question is really about evidence and how to pursue evidence for the sake of more knowledge, which is what Tamberly shared with us. I sometimes have students come to my office and we start talking about a research project, and I ask them, what is science? And they'll say, because I'm in a school of environmental sciences, they'll say, well, it's about wildlife, it's about trees, it's about soil. And I'll say, no, back up. Science is a process of inquiry with a purpose. It's maybe general knowledge, or it's a rather specific practical question that you want to understand. So my first response to this is, why would one want to measure these outcomes? And that's a really important question, because dedicating the time and effort to research is quite expensive. You've probably heard from the other speakers this week, the amount of time and effort and care, very careful effort, to reach good scientific conclusions or rigorous scientific conclusions. And that is important. And as Tamberly mentioned, if you want to pursue that, if that is important, then find the partners who can collaborate with you to help develop those research questions and measures in a way that helps build more knowledge, move an agenda, help inform policy, whatever the purposes might be. I'll offer another perspective, and this is coming from, ages and stages. I'm a little older, I've done original research, but more and more often I get questions for people asking about, well, what do we do with all this science? And so what I suggest is we can translate the existing research to benchmarks and guidelines for what a broader, not just one guide, one program, but if there were to be a broader policy or a broader program implementation, there could be some evidence-based guidelines and benchmarks. So for instance, how long? Dosage. Some of the most recent research on nature and health is addressing dosage. So there could be recommendations for the minimal amount of time for a forest therapy session. How often do you do this to sustain this benefit? Because there's carryover from these sessions, And how frequently do we do this to continue the momentum of these benefits? Who participates? Maybe there are some targets for different age groups or different individuals within schools. How often should this be offered within schools? So pursuing scientific questions have a reason for doing that other than, hey, we want to measure this. Because I hear that a lot. People approach me, well, we want to measure this. All right, why? Why do you want to measure that? So having that reason is very helpful in shaping the research program. But I think more immediately, we can build off the science that we have. And we've heard, I think that is happening in Japan, South Korea, as well as some other nations, that they're using the science to develop a program, procedures, and guidelines for how this all can happen. And that's far more accessible than doing the original research.
Yes, Robert.
If I may just briefly, I just wanted to add to that a little bit. So as I'm also, a practicing primary care pediatrician, I've ventured into the world of research myself, and I'm the co-principal investigator on a current randomized controlled trial that's NIH funded at my federally qualified health center. And I only bring that up to say, Kathy is absolutely dead on right about this. It's very expensive, it's very time intensive, and it takes an immense amount of effort. But having said that, I would also ask our audience to remember to involve, or at least to invite, the healthcare sector and to think about vulnerable populations in terms of measuring what these effects are. To keep that in mind in terms of a diversity of population, of BIPOC, in terms of who is to benefit from this research and who is to benefit the most from this research. These are other aspects that I think are very important that we shouldn't disregard.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm aware we're coming to the close of the event. And I just wanted to take the time to ask our panelists to just maybe go around to ask if you have any final thoughts, perhaps on your hope for the direction of forest therapy in the short or long-term future. We could go around the room, that would be great. Perhaps I'll start with Paula.
My hope. Well, I mean, the first hope is that, yeah, I see my country with more and more guides, trained guides, committed guides, that we become a bridge between the natural world and the people. Because I think it really is due time that we see nature not just as resources, as things that we can benefit from, because that has been the relationship we've had for centuries. And the state of the world that we're in right now with global change and everything is like, we cannot afford ourselves to keep having that relationship. If we keep having that relationship, I mean, the planet is just like, it's way too fast. And my biggest hope is that the moment we as humans open our hearts and our senses to the natural world that surrounds us, is like the changes in terms of how we relate to it and how much we want to take care of it are very quick. And so I feel this movement is crucial to the preservation of nature, both within the cities and around the cities. Like, we as humans need to fall in love with nature again. It's as simple as that. And this is a practice that opens up the door for that. And my hope is to see the infrastructure and the policies and everything around it sustaining it. But just with the people that are today listening to this talk, you can start creating a deeper relationship with nature around you right now. And just by that, you can be spokespeople and forget the word in English again, but really intermediaries between the natural world and the population. And we are needed more than ever. So that's my big hope.
Thank you. Tamberly, would you like to talk next?
Certainly. And I'll have to reflect on some of Paula's comments in terms of Latino communities being very, very deeply connected to the natural world. I've seen it through my work here in the US with Latino communities, but I've seen and I've been watching each night, that presenters have been on, and just the vibrant conversation and the excitement that you can just feel pulsing throughout these countries as people feel this practice coming towards them, but also envisioning how this kind of web of inner being is going to really connect among all of these dots that will bring this practice to Mexico, to Latin America, and again, my deepest gratitude to CONAFOR. I mean, to be, you know, a forest service of a country that is propelling this movement, and having the University of British Columbia and APFNet behind this effort and helping to propel at this level is just so incredibly exciting. It has been a vision. It's now a very, very shared vision, and it's so exciting to see this happening. And I would just call for continued conversation and action after this conference that has really planted the seedlings of forest therapy. And again, just deepest gratitude for all of the folks who have pulled this exciting event together, and all the presenters who've shared their hearts through this experience.
Great. Robert.
Yes, thank you again. This has been a fun and engaging conversation, albeit on a Friday evening here in Washington for me. You know, I would say that, you know, what I'd like to communicate now is my impression that we around the world are more alike than we are different. And, you know, we share a common anxiety. We share this uncertainty that Kathy talked about. And specifically in reference to the healthcare world, we called it the sector earlier. Although there are differences throughout our countries, as I was traveling around the world last year, I really was sort of, you know, taken aback how similar we are and how much we're ailing from this nature deficit, how much we're suffering from technology addiction, how much we're suffering from these checklists and this do, that's, you know, part of our society now. So I would just, you know, ask everybody who's participating, you know, not to forget about the healthcare providers, the healthcare workers, and all the patients that, you know, the literally trillions of patients we serve, so that, you know, by connecting with an individual doctor, for example, you're actually connecting with 1,000 more patients. So think of us, please think of us when we're talking about expansion of this around the world, and think about partnerships with the world of healthcare delivery. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, any last final thoughts?
Yes, I share my thanks and appreciation to my colleagues here. Wonderful. I've so enjoyed not only this session, but our planning session as well. And so the thoughts that I will end with, when I started, I mentioned COVID. We're in very unusual times, and but the health concerns that we're seeing now made visible in terms of mental health, in terms of disparities in consequence for different groups of people, be it ethnic, cultural, or even the employment, their service to our communities. At the same time, our planet is hurting. And as a one-time biologist, I'm really attuned to that. Consequences for air and water for communities. A remarkable hurricane season in Latin America and the southern United States this year. Derecho in the Midwestern US, extreme localized winds, very destructive. So our planet is hurting as well. And yet most people are so removed from the source of their food, their water, everything. So my hope is that forest therapy is that intimate connection that people can restore an understanding of the power of the earth and the power of nature. And in that way, they perhaps develop gratitude. I think we have so lost any sense of gratitude for what nature provides in the broadest sense. And if we restore gratitude, begin to feel gratitude, begin to recognize again how grounded we are in the land, that maybe that would have consequence for stewardship. Maybe people would take less time on Netflix and go outside and try to help restore a forest area. Or maybe they would contact their elected officials or a forestry ministry or agency and say, you know, this is important stuff. We are willing to vote to support policy, to support funding, and so on. So while forest bathing is a very intimate, personal experience, forest therapy, I see it as a step to a broader awakening, perhaps, a broader recognition of the importance of nature in our lives and what we should do for it out of a sense of gratitude.
Great, thank you so much. So I just wanted to take this time again to thank our panelists for participating and to invite the audience to contact us directly with any follow-up questions you might have. And again, I would like to say thank you to our colleagues at CONAFOR for spearheading this initiative. And we look forward to future collaboration with all of you in hopes of furthering human health through our connection to nature. And right now we will hear some closing remarks from CONAFOR's Director General, Senor Leon Jorge Castaños Martinez, and the Director of UBC's Asia Forest Research Center, Dr. Guangyu Wang. Thanks again to everyone.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Khalifi. We are having some problems with technical problems, but we will continue just in some minutes. So if you can wait just some minutes, we will restart the transmission in Facebook and we will can see the videos, please. Just a minute.
Okay, thank you.
So to my fellow panelists, while we're waiting, what one word would you use or short phrase would you use to summarize our conversation here?
I feel a big sense of hope. I really feel this like English not being my first language makes it complicated when it's emotional. But I feel it as a before and after. Like I really see this as the seed and the seedling and the fertilizer, like everything is here and it's just a matter of time for it to grow. And I think we can't even envision the consequences that this can have. So I feel a big, big sense of happiness and hope.
Yeah.
It's funny you asked that, Kathy, because I feel like that's one of the things we do in our circle, is we sometimes in one word or a short phrase, and I think the word that I use is connecting, and connected or connections. I think we did very well in listening to each other, I think, and participating in that way that is active.
And I would say a vision of interconnection and earth dreaming, because I feel that I went to sit under my group of tree friends, my elm trees, the very few trees I have, that we have on our property, and just calling to nature to guide us in this world, because we are those who will need to be saved. Nature and the natural world, or more the human world, will be here. But I think that the earth is calling for us to support the conservation and the connection that we all have with the natural world. So thank you for bringing that forth, Kathy.
Great.
I would, oh, please.
We're ready to reconnect. So I will wait for Karina to jump on and for the last remarks from our respective directors.
What are your words, Kathy?
Inspiration. What you all provide in what you do.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Guangyu Wang. I'm the director of the UBC Asian Forest Research Center. It has been a great honor and pleasure coordinating with this event with my colleagues in the Canada and their excellent teams. I would like to thank the experts for their interesting and informative presentation this week, as well as the panelists that participate in the discussion this afternoon. More importantly, I would like to thank Kathy and Karina for their hard work behind the theme for several months. This is our hope that forest therapy reach the wider and international audience. We look forward to work with all the individuals and organizations that wish to be further in this important field. Thank you again, and looking forward to see you in the future. Bye-bye.
Buenas tardes a todas y todos. Saludo cordial y reconocimiento al doctor Guangyu Wang, director del Centro de Investigación del Parque Nacional y decano asociado en la Facultad de Silvicultura, y a la maestra Califi Ferretti Galón, gerenta de la Oficina para las Américas de la Red Asia-Pacífico para el manejo sostenible y la restauración de bosques, ambos, de la Universidad de Columbia Británica en Canadá, promotores y coorganizadores del evento. Agradecemos a los expertos y profesionales internacionales por su participación y colaboración durante esta semana, de quienes hemos aprendido de los resultados de distintas investigaciones sobre baños de bosque, terapia forestal, medicina forestal y política pública, con el respaldo de renombradas instituciones académicas y los beneficios en distintas áreas de la salud. Al doctor Ching Li destacó, entre otros beneficios, los siguientes: reducción de la adrenalina, noradrenalina y el cortisol, hormonas del estrés; aumento de la cantidad de células asesinas naturales, entre paréntesis NK, así como la cantidad de granzimas, perforina y granulicina; disminución de los índices de ansiedad, depresión, ira, fatiga y confusión; aumento en los niveles de vigor; reducción de la presión arterial y el ritmo cardíaco; y efecto preventivo sobre los trastornos del sueño y mentales. Escuchamos la intervención del doctor Andreas Mikkelsen, quien señaló que debido al crecimiento de las ciudades y la aceleración del ritmo de vida, estamos experimentando aumento del estrés, enfermedades psiquiátricas, como depresión, síndromes de ansiedad e incluso esquizofrenia. Llamó nuestra atención la pregunta que planteó: ¿es a causa del déficit de la naturaleza? Destacó los resultados de un estudio realizado en Londres, en el que se compararon grupos de personas que llevaron a cabo caminatas con el mismo ejercicio, esfuerzo y velocidad, unos en la calle Oxford y otros en el famoso Parque Hyde. El resultado mostró una gran diferencia en la función pulmonar, mucho mejor en aquellas que caminaron en el parque, mientras que las que caminaron en la ciudad tuvieron incluso algún deterioro respiratorio. Recomendó pasar 2 horas a la semana en la naturaleza para alcanzar el bienestar. Conforme a los estudios realizados, no importa si son 2 horas en un solo bloque o si son 8 bloques de 15 minutos. El tercer ponente fue el doctor Ainhoa Uehara, quien señaló que hace falta mucha investigación y que la terapia forestal no necesariamente contribuye a mejorar la salud para todas las personas. Tanto los seres humanos como los bosques son diversos. Sugirió realizar programas personalizados, haciendo una evaluación previa de las personas y del bosque, para posteriormente formular un programa específico para llevarlo a la práctica, documentarlo y medirlo. Me refiero nuevamente al doctor Wang-Yu Wang, cuarto ponente, quien destacó el papel que juegan los parques nacionales y los bosques urbanos en la recreación y la salud de las personas. Compartió la investigación que realiza la Universidad de Columbia Británica para conocer cómo se puede replicar los entornos forestales de manera artificial en los hogares u oficinas, a fin de disfrutar de los beneficios de la terapia forestal, como la generación de aire enriquecido con iones negativos, el uso de terpenos, o sea, aceites esenciales, y la reproducción de ciertos tipos de sonidos. El jueves, la doctora Anisa Hernández de Puerto Rico nos habló de su experiencia como guía certificada en terapia forestal y sus experiencias de práctica con varios pacientes. Tuvimos la oportunidad de participar en un ejercicio denominado Presencia del Placer, el cual consiste en conectarse con los elementos de la naturaleza a través de los primeros 5 sentidos: vista, olfato, oído, tacto y gusto. Ella señaló, sin embargo, que a través de la terapia forestal se han descubierto hasta 13 sentidos. Ese mismo día participó el doctor Won Sop-shin, académico de la República de Corea, quien nos habló de la restauración forestal en su país desde 1950 a la fecha, transitando de políticas de restauración y desarrollo forestal sustentables hasta la actual política forestal para la salud humana y pública. Llegar hasta la promulgación de la Ley de Promoción del Bienestar Forestal en 2016 y la creación del Instituto de Bienestar Forestal de Corea, cuyo objetivo es promover el bienestar del bosque y contribuir a la mejora de la salud y la calidad de vida y la búsqueda de la felicidad mediante la prestación de servicios de bienestar forestal diversos y bien organizados para las poblaciones especiales de grupos económicos y sociales vulnerables. Este instituto emite un vale para obtener beneficios de bienestar del bosque. Reconocimiento también a las expertas y expertos que nos acompañaron en el panel del día de hoy. A la estimada doctora Kathleen Wolf, investigadora científica social de la Facultad de Ciencias Ambientales y Forestales de la Universidad de Washington. La doctora Tamberly Conway, fundadora de Conservation Connections, guía certificada por la Asociación de Naturaleza y Terapia Forestal y directora del programa certificado de senderos para terapia forestal de la Asociación de Naturaleza y Terapia Forestal. Al doctor Robert Sarr, fundador y director médico de Park RX América, y a la maestra Paula Pijuan, fundadora de Respira Bosque y guía certificada por la Asociación de Naturaleza y Terapia Forestal, quienes en el panel respondieron a preguntas relacionadas con el apoyo y la adopción de la terapia forestal en las comunidades y a través de las políticas públicas, la infraestructura social y ecológica necesarias para fomentar la terapia forestal, los recursos recomendados para las organizaciones y gobiernos que buscan profundizar en este tema. Finalmente, preguntarnos qué sigue en México después de este evento, que nos motiva y nos da una referencia de lo que puede lograrse en la vinculación del bosque con la salud. Apuntamos las siguientes líneas. Inventarios de comunidades campesinas con proyectos de ecoturismo, de parques públicos a nivel municipal con potencial para este tema y áreas naturales protegidas con riqueza en su biodiversidad. Segunda línea, acercamiento y promoción del tema con las secretarías de salud a nivel federal y en algunos estados, por ejemplo, los que amablemente estuvieron conectados en este webinar. Tercera línea, acercamiento con la Universidad de Guadalajara y otras instituciones para inducir el establecimiento de programas académicos y de investigación en medicina forestal. Cuarto, inducir la certificación nacional y explorar colaboraciones internacionales para el establecimiento de un sistema de certificación internacional para especialistas en medicina forestal y terapeutas forestales. Y por último, sondear qué podemos hacer en los apoyos al desarrollo forestal para incluir el componente de bosques y salud. Finalmente, deseamos agradecer la participación de quienes nos acompañaron a lo largo de estos 4 días y de mi parte, hacer un público reconocimiento al equipo de la Comisión Nacional Forestal de México, a Karina López Sánchez, Sergio Ábalos Félix, Vanessa Becerra, Daniela Lince Romero, Jorge Jurado Álvarez, Miguel Ángel Avilés Mendoza, Renato Canales Aceves, Simón Avellaneda Guillén, Julio César López Gómez, Elizabeth Galvez García, Gilardo Holguín Trejo, Susana Silva Gallardo, Denitza González Quiñones, Pamela Mosqueda Gómez, Berta Barreto Sigala y Alicia Gil Santamaría, a quienes reconozco el gran esfuerzo para llevar a cabo esta semana. Me complace clausurar esta serie de webinars el día de hoy, viernes 16 de octubre, desde la ciudad de Zapopan, Jalisco, México. Muchas gracias.
Great. Thank you again for everyone who participated and the audience that showed up to listen and to submit questions. I look forward to communicating and collaborating with you all in the future. Good night and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Khaleesi. Night.
Thank you, everybody. It was a really good pleasure.
Gracias a todos.
Gracias. Gracias a los.
Gratitud.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Gracias, Cari.
Have a relaxed
Really
weekend.
appreciate your support and help for this.
Gracias, Katy. Buenas noches a todos.
Vemos. Muchas gracias.
Let's get outside.
Let's get outside.
I look forward to next time.
Bye.
Muy bien, Cari, ya finalizamos la transmisión. Nos encontramos aún transmitiendo en YouTube, pero ya finalizamos la transmisión en Facebook.